Welcome to Figure Feedback. My name is Jeremy, and inside of this box is a new printer from Bambu Lab. But as I record this, I have absolutely no idea what's in it. I don't know the name of it. I don't know what it looks like. I'm not even aware of any rumors that would suggest was in this box, but I'm sure the title shows exactly what's in here, and you've seen a lot of different videos by now of everyone that's showing the same printer. But to start off this video, I just wanted to give a genuine first impression of whatever the heck is inside of this box. So let's open it up and check it out. Judging from the size of this box, and judging from the fact that we've already gotten the newest versions of the H series and the P series, I am going to guess that perhaps this contains the successor to the A series of Bambu Lab printers. So maybe inside of here is going to be like the A2 or the A2 mini or something along those lines. I don't know, but let's just try not to hurt ourselves and open this box up. What is this now? On the top, oh, it looks like I was wrong. Bambu Lab X2D AMS combo. It is not the A series, it is the X series. So the X1, X1C, we are now on X2D. I don't know why I thought it would be bigger than this, but then again, I never had an actual, X1 before. So, all right, well, let's take everything out. All right, so we got the top cover here. Inside here is the toolbox. Toolbox contains all of the usual bits and pieces that you're going to need, including we got a wrench here. We got some lubrication, looks like a spare filament cutter, a spare 0.4 millimeter nozzle, nozzle wiper spares. So familiar with that. All right, so hopefully I'm not feeling that in the morning on my back. All right, let's open this up here. And by the way, in case I didn't say it earlier, special thanks to Bambu Lab for sending this to me. I have never been a part of a launch for a Bambu Lab product before, so it's very awesome that they thought of me this time around. I appreciate it. This is really interesting because, as I said, I haven't experienced a X series printer before, but this is smaller than I thought it was going to be. This is the back of it. Let me just swing around so that you can see the front. So, just basic first impressions, just looking at this, it reminds me of like a smaller H2D, and I'm judging that based on the sight window on the left and the right side. The H2D has that as well. Slowly slide off that. And then on the inside, that is going to be the AMS2. So I am going to take my time. I don't want to mess anything up. I am going to have to free these screws so I can take everything out. So I'm going to do that, and we'll come back and we'll take a look at the progress after I've done all of that good stuff. So if you've owned a Bambu Lab printer before, then this next process is going to be pretty familiar to you, but if you're not, this is basically how it all goes down. So with the AMS2 combo, the AMS comes inside of the printer, and they have it in there with some screws that you have to remove. And so after you remove about 3 screws from it, you'll be able to go in from the top of the printer with the top lid off, of course. And you just reach down in there, remove some packaging materials, and pull the AMS2 straight out. And then once that's out of there, there's going to be another bracket piece that you need to remove. Again, you got to take some screws out. But fortunately, you're going to be using the same supplied Allen wrench for all of these screws. It's nice and long, so you don't have to worry about really cramping your fingers in order to get those screws out. So just take your time, work them one by one, and then you'll be able to take out that bottom bracket. But keep in mind that the foam underneath the build plate, that is supposed to stay there until you're done with the actual calibration of the printer, so don't worry about that for now. Next, you've got to remove some screws that keeps the bed locked in place during transit. Again, you're going to be using that very same Allen key, and just reach around to the sides and to the back, and you'll be able to get those screws out nice and easy. You'll also notice over on the side there are these little red clamps. Now, you don't need any tools to get these off. All you have to do is just separate them with your hands manually. They're pretty pliable, and then you take them off from the rail on the left and the rail on the right. And now here comes a part that a lot of people, I'm sure including myself, dread, and that's putting the screen on these printers. But it's not as bad as you might think. Bambu did make it, I guess, as easy as one could make it. You take the screen and you just basically plug it in. You have to give yourself a little bit of slack on that cable, but the actual connector piece is not super thin. But I know it's a little bit intimidating. You don't want to mess anything up, but trust me, it'll be all right. You'll just plug that right in, and then you just simply attach the screen to the frame of the printer, and you just slide it to lock it into place, and that part is done. Now when we flip the printer over, you see that there's a bit of work that we have to do back here, starting with the auxiliary extruder. Because this printer does have two different extruders, you're going to have a main one, and then you're going to have the auxiliary one. You do need to connect that to the printer in order for it to work. Now there's this really small connector that you need to connect to the back of the auxiliary extruder. And again, if you've got larger hands, this part can be a little bit finicky to make sure that you can really get that in and lock it into place. Once you do that, there is a place on the printer where you'll be able to slide in the auxiliary extruder and lock it into place in a way similar to how you connected the screen. And then you got to take a PTFE tube that's sticking out of the back of the printer, and you have to connect it to the auxiliary extruder like so. Easy peasy. And you just keep pushing it in there until it can't go anymore and it is effectively locked into place. But the fun doesn't stop there, because you have to take that little wrench that's supplied and you have to turn that little black piece, and you have to keep on turning it, and then it starts to click once you've reached the maximum tightness that you're supposed to be at. So just make sure that you keep going until you can hear those little faint clicks, and then you can move on to the next step. Next, you got to take one of those long PTFE tubes that's connected to the back of the printer, and you just simply connect it to the auxiliary extruder. And you can take a look at the back of it now, and that is pretty much what it's supposed to look like. But don't worry, if you're going to have one piece of the PTFE tube that's not connected to anything, but don't worry about that right now, because now we need to start setting up the AMS. The AMS also has some packing material on the inside that you need to remove, and then it also has some desiccant packs on the inside too. The desiccant packs are wrapped in plastic, so you have to take the plastic out and you have to open it, and then you can take the actual desiccant packs and put them right back to where you got them from, inside of the AMS in the very back. Then you can take one of those PTFE tubes that's dangling from the printer. You see here I'm using the darker colored one, and plugging that into the AMS, and that is going to serve as the pathway for the filament to go from the AMS to the main extruder, which is the left extruder. And then you have the cable, which if you are familiar with the Bambu Lab printer, you know exactly what this cable looks like, and you simply connect it from the back of the AMS directly into the printer as shown right here. Then you can connect the external spool holder like this. Now fortunately there are no tools required, it just slides right onto the printer, but that's only one piece of it. It comes in two different pieces. So then you have to grab the other part of the external spool holder and just clamp it down right there to the part that was already connected to the printer, and this is where you'll be able to run your filament through. But in order to run the filament through, you need, that's right, the PTFE tube that was just dangling there. Now you have a place for it, so now you can connect that to the little coupler right there. And now when you decide to use an external spool, you'll be able to run that from the side of the printer through that PTFE tube into the auxiliary extruder. Now the fun's not over yet. We still have to install the external fan exhaust bundle. So this one just simply fits very nicely into the back of the printer. You just have to make sure that you have the male ends on the back of the fan connected to the female ends that are connected to the printer, and then you can just slide those in place just like you did with the screen on the front. And then you have to plug that fan in using a cable that is very similar, if not the same, as the one that connects to the AMS. And with that, the Bambu Lab X2D AMS2 combo is now fully assembled. And at this point, you can turn the printer on and go through all the setup processes, including connecting it to Wi-Fi if that's something that you want to do, and running through the initial calibrations before you can start your first print. So all in all, doing this will take you maybe around 20 or 30 minutes. It is nothing too crazy, but take your time and you'll get everything right the first time around. So I hope you enjoyed that unboxing and setup experience, but since then about a month has passed and I've been using that time and the hundreds of hours on this printer to print a lot of different things, including the stuff that you see here on this table. In this review, I wanted to have a figure focus for figure feedback. So I've been printing all of these different models, things that bring a smile to my face, but I've also printed some things that could be considered more functional in nature, and I'll be sure to show you those things throughout the course of this video. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of that, I know that you are going to want to know some different specs about this printer and what makes it different than what Bambu Lab has offered in the past. So we're going to get into that right now. But first, we're going to talk about the price. So for just the X2D by itself, without the AMS, the price is going to be $649. But if you want to include the AMS2 combo that sits here on top, then that price is going to jump to $899. So when you watch this and you watch other people's videos or whatever it is you got to do, if you want to check it out, I will have links in the description where you can go pick it up. Yes, they are affiliate links. You can use them if you want. If you don't have to. All right, so design. So this printer, just like I said in the very beginning of the video, it's just like a mini H2D. Not exactly like the H2D, but a smaller version of it with some different components thrown in here or there. And I don't know if you've ever seen the H2D in person, but it is a big printer. It is big and it is heavy. So if you don't have the space for a printer that you need two people to move around, then this is going to be something that's more up your alley. You'll be able to put it on the table. You'll be able to put it on the desk. If you have some type of shelving unit, it'll be able to be moved into that a lot more easily with just one person. And it still maintains that sort of rounded off rectangular design so that you can put more than one next to each other and just keep that space pretty even between them. So it still has that. Still has those cool sight windows on the left and the right. And the big thing is that it still uses two different nozzles with two different extruders. But here's the big difference between them. Only one is a direct drive extruder. The other one that sits on the back that I installed is a Bowden extruder. That's a name that we haven't heard in a long time. And frankly, was kind of surprised to see that Bambu Lab brought it back. But that's what they did. And so the main nozzle is going to be with the direct drive extruder, and that's the left nozzle. And then the auxiliary nozzle, that's what they're calling it, is going to be fed by the Bowden extruder that sits on the back. So why did they decide to go with the Bowden extruder instead of just doing like the H2D and just having direct drive extruders right there on the print head? Well, the reason that Bambu Lab gave is because by removing one of the extruders and putting it on the back, naturally, it makes the tool head lighter, and then it allows it to zip around a little bit faster, give you more flexibility in that way. And then also by putting it on the back, they kind of compensated for that by giving it the power to pull the filament from the external filament reel right here with a decent amount of force to help to prevent feeding issues. Now, that being said, I have not had a feeding issue with this extruder. And when you load this filament for the first time, you hear those motors turning, and it does pull this filament into it with a pretty decent amount of force. So yeah, I guess they're right about that. However, I have had feeding issues coming from the AMS2 down into the main extruder. So, take that as you will, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because there are some downsides to this boating setup, with one of the main ones being speed. So just so I can make sure that I get everything correctly, when you do use the auxiliary extruder, your print speeds are not going to exceed 200 millimeters per second. And the acceleration speeds are going to be within 1000 millimeters per second square. So it does not move as fast as the main extruder is going to be able to print. And when they call it the auxiliary extruder, like, they actually really mean it. It's not meant to be used as the main extruders. The right nozzle is not meant to be used as the primary nozzle to make your models. It's just there to help you out along the way. For example, you can load up PLA inside of the main left nozzle, and then if you want to do PETG support interfaces, that's what you would use the auxiliary nozzle for. Or if you wanted to do, let's say, TPU, you could do TPU through the main one, and then you can use PLA as a support material through the auxiliary extruder if you want to do things that way. And even if you decide to use like PETG through the auxiliary extruder as like the main material that you print with, a warning will come up on the screen that tells you that using PETG through the auxiliary extruder may impact your print quality. So it's just there to help you out and not to be the main way that you print. So since you have these two nozzles with these two extruders, what other limitations are you going to run into? Well, there's going to be a slight limitation of the amount of space that you have to use when you're printing. Just like on the X2D, how one nozzle can only go so far to the left and then the other one can only go so far to the right, and you have these borders that neither of them can cross. It's something similar to this, except all of the limitations are on the left side and not the right side. So breaking that down, it means that when you use the main nozzle, the main extruder, it means that you can print all around the plate. It's going to be 256 millimeters by 256 by 260. So it's a little bit bigger up there. But if you decide to use both of them in conjunction, then your limitations start to show themselves. So for example, if you use the right nozzle, you are limited to 235.5 millimeters. And when you look in the slicer with the X2D profile, you'll see the area in which the right nozzle cannot get to. All right, but when you do use the right nozzle, it goes to 235.5 by 256 by 256. And if you use both of them, both the left and the right nozzles, then your maximum space that you can use is going to be 235.5 by 256 millimeters by 256 millimeters. So you lose space. Okay, it's not a huge amount of space, but you're still losing space. So that tradition is still carrying over from the X2D. Now, as you take a look on the inside of the printer, it also looks similar to the X2D, but is definitely not exact. For example, the X2D has a rail in the back, whereas the X2D is using those smooth rods to handle that motion from left to right. And another thing that you may notice is on the side, right around here, there are two labels for hot and cold. And that's because this printer is capable of heating the chamber internally up to 65 degrees Celsius, which is what you'll want to use when you're printing with ABS, ASA, nylon, those high heat materials that can benefit from the heated chamber to keep them from warping. This printer is going to be able to help you out with that. But this is not a toggle that you have to put your hand in and flick it from hot to cold whenever you want to use those materials. When you go into the slicer and you choose one of those high temp materials and you send that G code over to the printer, it's going to automatically know, and it's going to switch itself to hot into code as it needs to, and you'll be able to see that in action. And when it comes to bringing in some ventilation, when you're printing with PLA, for example, unlike the H2D, you don't have a cool little flap in the front that just opens up. Instead, it's going to bring in air right underneath here. You can put your hand under here and you can actually feel some openings right here at the bottom. It also doubles as a place where you can hold the printer and lift it, but that's where the air is going to come into the printer when you're printing with PLA. Also on the inside of the printer are two nozzle wipers, one for the left and one for the right nozzle. And there is a post there that mechanically switches between one nozzle to the other. So unlike the H2D, where it is a motor that controls the nozzles switching, this one is purely mechanical. So it just runs into it and then it just changes it over as it needs to. So that's another difference between the two. And I also imagine doing it that way also helps to keep the price down a bit as well. You're still going to be purging the material when necessary, whether it's calibrating the filament or if you're going to be working with more than two types of filament at one time. And the poop chute is still located on the back. But this poop chute is very smooth. It's a very smooth plastic that they have here. And I have never encountered a poop chute clog. Nothing has ever been jammed up in there at all. There are methods of detection to let you know if there's a clog in there, but I've never needed it like at all. And here is roughly the amount of waste that I have accumulated in poop from this printer since using it. And yeah, it's still a lot of poop, but it all just fell into this little packaging material that came with the printer really easily. So as far as that poop chute ever being clogged and backed up, that has never happened. And I'm wondering if it has something to do with this nice smooth chute that it has. And it also shoots it out there with a good amount of force as well. So no issues from that end. So based on everything that I've told you so far, what you might be getting from this is this printer is not an evolutionary step up in the Bambu Lab family of printers. It's not like the X2C that has the vortex system with the cool nozzle swapping going on the side. This is just a upgrade from the previous X1 series that borrows some DNA from the H2 series. So it's not a massive leap in innovation and a massive leap in quality, but it's just the next step forward, you know? So if you are hoping to still print with multiple colors and things like that, you're going to have a little bit of your reduced waste, but not a whole lot since you're still only working with the two nozzles. All right, but what about the print quality? Let's start with the print quality. I'm going to show you some things that I printed here. Let's start with the first layer test. Here are some examples of first layer tests that I've done. Both of these was with third-party filament. So just kind of starting here with this gray filament here. Very solid first layer test. I mean, this is just a nice sheet. It is nearly perfect, well, with the exception of a little bit of scratchiness down here on the corner here. And I also do have to tell you that when I did this print and when I did a lot of these prints, it was on previous firmware to this printer. I've had about 2 or 3 firmware updates since I started using it. So there have been some things that may have been improved in it. I just want to let you know that, but still very, very solid first layer. It adhered perfectly. Nothing is coming apart. I tried this again with some other third-party black filament for another first layer test, and more or less the same thing. A little bit of thinness down here, and there was a little bit of separation with here as well. This filament may have been a little bit problematic. I'll show you some more of that in the future. And then we had like a little bit of a tear right here on the right side, but everything else came out just fine. Okay, so those were the first layer tests. So let me tell you what the biggest issue that I've had using this printer so far. And it's been unlike anything that I've experienced using Bambu Lab printers, which include the A1, A1 Mini, and X2D, in that it has been kind of temperamental when it comes to certain third-party filaments. And that's something that I haven't experienced before. So just for example, the biggest issue was with supports. And when I would use some third-party filament using tree supports, they would be extremely unpleasant to remove, and to the point where it would cause scarring and just general ugliness. Here's an example here of this Master Roshi figure that I printed using this gray filament that I believe was made from Deeply filament, which was one of my favorite brands of cheap filament. And as I tried to take the supports off, you can kind of see, like right under there, this is all just support material that is more or less fused to this model. You see it's like some kind of ugliness, you know, underneath there. And it was just pretty bad. The model itself came out looking good. You can see the detail of him, and I'm pretty sure this model was like AI generated or whatever. But still, the detail and the quality looked good, but the problem was with the supports. And playing around with support settings is generally something that I have not had to do with Bambu Lab printers before, regardless of whatever filament that I use. And I did share with them my experience that I was having. And as we were trying to troubleshoot it, I was asked to just, try some Bambu Lab filament and see what the results would be. So I did try some Bambu Lab filament to see what the difference would be on this. I took that exact same filament over to the Bambu Lab X2D, kept the settings the same, just it's a different profile because it was the H2D instead of the X2D. And I printed the exact same model, and the supports came off so much easier. So it doesn't have those nasty scarring like you kind of see between his legs, and the filament was not fused to him like it was on the X2D, which was really quite weird. This is still with third-party filament. Now, I did try to use the official Bambu Lab filament. At that time, all I had was a little bit of green PLA left, regular PLA. I printed the exact same model, just let Bambu settings do all the work. And again, it came out good. The supports came off. Everything was just fine with this one and the one that came off of the X2D, or the H2D rather, but the X2D, it was difficult to remove those supports using that filament, as well as some other filaments as well. Here's an example of something else that I tried to print. This is using that same gray filament, and this was part of a Resident Evil 9 Requiem weapon prop. And you see that I was using tree supports for this. But these supports are pretty much, well, they're almost, I don't want to say they're impossible to get off, but it's more effort than anyone would ever want to put into supports. And trying to get this off is probably going to end up hurting you. And even if I did get these supports off, then they're coming apart in such a way that they're going to be all in these grooves, and it's just going to be kind of the cleanup is going to be horrible. And I tried my best, but it just wasn't working with this type of filament. So I tried printing it again with some high temp filament. I had some blend of polycarbonate and ABS. I printed the exact same model, and this is how it turned out. And the supports on this came off easily. I was able to just grab them and just take them right off. But this other deeply gray filament that I tried to use before, it's just been unpleasant experience using it on the X2D, even though it works just fine in the H2D. And that's something that you should be aware of. I encountered that with some other filaments as well, including some black deeply filament that had some supports that were hard to take off, that I tried to mitigate by just increasing the top Z height on those supports all the way up to 0.35. And that helped, but at the same time, that third-party filament was having, a kind of a rough time. But that's kind of one of the reasons why that auxiliary extruder exists, right? Because you could use PETG as a support interface for PLA to make support removal easier. And that's something that I tried to do, again, using some third-party filament, this time for this mask here. that took quite a long time to print, but I did use PETG support interfaces for that. And oh yeah, before I forget, when you do choose to use the auxiliary extruder for support material, for support interface material, it will increase your print time by a pretty darn good amount. We're talking about around double the amount of time that it would take for you to print one model using one type of filament. When you use the two types of filament to use as support material, that time just shoots right up. All right, so that's something that you need to be aware of. But this mask here, look at the detail of this. It came out really good. It's supposed to be like a tree type of mask. So really, really great in the design and the earthly look of it all. But when it came to removing the supports, even though I used Bambu Lab, PETG, high flow, for the support interface with some third-party filament, and I think this might have been from Elegoo, I might be mistaken, but the supports were still extremely difficult for me to get off of this model, despite the fact that I chose to use the support interface material of PETG. Now, here's the thing, the back of the mask looks nice and clean. It's not all scarred up because the PETG did manage to separate cleanly without leaving a bunch of horrible residue and marks behind, which is what it's supposed to do. But it was hard to get to the point where I was actually able to remove it. And maybe it had to do with the way that the supports were set up. There were a lot of them. Maybe they were just kind of bunched up and bumping into each other or whatever. I don't know. But it was still very hard to remove those supports. I did relay the information back to Bambu Lab. They gave me some advice on what I can do, such as increasing the interface layers for the PETG interface layers to make it more easy for me. And then, you know, because I was using third-party filaments with their filaments, you know, maybe things just weren't melding well together and I needed to do a little bit more work to dial things in to make them release more easily. Fair point, but it's something that I never had to do before. So I definitely have to, you know, tell you about that now. But eventually, I did get myself some Bambu Lab filament, and I continued with my different experimentations when it came to like hair for like my Super Saiyan 3 Goku figure right here. So this is also with third-party yellow PLA with the Bambu Lab high flow PETG filament, but I did increase the interface layers on the PETG just to give it more of a chance to separate easily in addition to separating cleanly. And this time it worked very good. I believe I got some footage here so I can show you how everything just wants to remove in one piece. It's not effortless, but it also doesn't take a lot of effort or even medium effort, you know, just a tiny little bit of elbow grease, because some supports are just kind of, you know, lodged in different ways so that they have to kind of get out of their own way in order to release cleanly. But it did work out just fine with this hair. And I wanted it to work out good for this hair because there was a lot of different points of support for that. So since I started doing that, with the third-party filament, increasing those support layers, I think I had 3 interface layers. Separating the PETG from the PLA became a lot easier. And then after some of the firmware updates, even when using some of the third-party filament, I have seen less effort on my part to remove supports without messing around with the different settings. I don't know what they did with these firmware updates, but as time went on, things did get easier for me in that regard. And every time I used the Bambu Lab filament and there were supports, those always came off as easily as they always had. So that's where I'm at now. But there were so many different fun things that I decided to print on this printer. And some things worked out good, some things did not work out as good. Take a look at this marble creation here. And so the way that this is made up, they have these bases here, and then you have these different modules that you can put on the bases. But I did struggle with creating the base, like what you have here, because every time I would try to go to print it, it would get to a decent amount, but it would always come off of the build plate. And I don't know why. The build plate was clean and I didn't use any glue or anything. And I even used the BQ frostbite plate, and even that would separate. And that is really odd. I never had really like issues with the frostbite plate. And even when I attached a brim to it, it would always disconnect from the plate in the exact same spot. So I ended up having to print the yellow part of the base on another printer, which was the Snapmaker U1, and it printed it just fine in one go. So I don't know what was going on with that, if there's some sort of temperature issue going on inside the chamber, if it was getting a little bit too hot in there, not enough ventilation. I don't know. I just know that I tried printing that base a couple of different times. It didn't work. Tried it on another printer and it worked just fine. I mean, that's just what happened. You know, I gotta tell you about it. But everything else was turning out, you know, very, very good. And what's really cool about this, you know, the mechanism works just fine of me turning. And then these little ball bearings, they just go around and around and around. And it's just fun. My kids like this. I like it more than they do, I think. And, you know, everything just fits together well. And it's a fun little mechanical toy that you can play with. Hue Forge stuff is always good. I didn't do as much use for Hue Forge as I normally do, but you can take a look. Here's this Spider-Man Hue Forge that I did just right here on the X2D, made up of 4 different colors, I believe. And, you know, it just came out just fine. Looks good, right? Looks good. We also have some more smaller miniature figures that I put up. And again, I'm pretty sure these were like AI generated, but whatever. We still want to see the print quality. I went a bit Dragon Ball crazy when reviewing this printer. So, you know, I can show you all of these smaller models that I made that are Dragon Ball related. 2 different types of Gohan, who future Gohan is the GOAT of all time, in case you didn't know, as well as some non-AI generated miniatures here, like this Mushroom Man that required no supports at all, and also this really cool dragon back here that also didn't require any support. So I just wanted to, you know, get a sense of what the miniature printing process was going to be like. And these were all just done using the main extruder. Didn't really use the auxiliary extruder unless I was deliberately trying to print things with PETG support interfaces, or if it was done in multicolor. Now, speaking of multicolor, there are some multicolor models here on this table, but not a whole lot. So if we take a look at some of these Lego inspired models here, again from Dragon Ball, the Majin Buu, for example, all of the designs that's like on his chest or everything, those are not individual pieces. Those are multicolor prints that just stick out more. Those came out really good, as well as some of the other patterns on like Goku's arms and Goku's sleeves for this Super Saiyan Goku right here with the obnoxiously huge hair. And then some of these other prints were just made from individual pieces that were glued together later, which I think could help give you a cleaner look for your models. And these also came out looking really good. And I was talking about that deeply filament earlier. This was also printed with the deeply filament, and removing the supports from this model wasn't so difficult. So I don't know what was going on, but this knight here came out so good. I mean, the texture, there's different texture on it. There's smooth texture, there's detail on his armor pieces, like this chainmail on the back. This is like one of the nicest models that I've printed on this printer. Just came out so good. It didn't have a ton of supports, but you know, this is really good. I'll try to leave links to everything that I got here that was, you know, free to download in the description. And then as far as some wall art kind of stuff goes, got this cool Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. I believe this is supposed to be like Leonardo. This is definitely something that can be painted and hung up. It did not require any supports. There's some spaces here so that you can hang it up. Nice. They came out really, really good. So, you know, the quality of the prints that you can get off of this printer, I mean, it's just like you would expect with any Bambu Lab printer pretty much. It makes very, very nice models, and it can do that consistently. But The second biggest issue that I've had using this, it had to do with the AMS and how sometimes it would have trouble feeding the filament into the AMS. It would think that there was a tangle or a jam, even though there was no tangle and there was no jam. And the craziest thing about it is, in order for me to fix it, all I had to do was take the filament out of the AMS and just cut a little bit off the tip and put it back in, and everything was fine. So, I think it's more of an AMS kind of a issue and not like a printer issue, but that is something that I ran into multiple times when I'm sitting at the computer and I see that, hey, that error pops up. And I'm like, here we go again. And I come down here and I'm like, what's wrong, printer? And I just got to take the filament out, cut a little bit off the tip, put it back in, and it acts like everything is fine. I don't know what was going on with that, but I had to deal with that time and time again. Not most of the time, but enough for me to kind of get a little bit annoyed by it. Definitely. Now, as far as some more functional things go, I admittedly didn't print a whole lot of functional things, but what I did print that was functional is still pretty helpful. Like this phone stand here. This is very small and it's very helpful. You just put your phone in here, either in landscape mode or portrait mode, and it holds it in place. And then you can, hook this onto a bag or something, so that totally works. Oh, I didn't even realize there was a bit of a brim that I did not take off. So now there's even more space to hang it up on a bag. So that's functional too. Another thing that I printed that's functional that I put quite a bit of stress on is this little part right here. Now this was printed with that third party, I believe it was in Slogic PC ABS blend, which printed just like a dream in this printer. Never had any problems with that filament at all, using a generic PC profile in Bambu Studio, and it just nailed it first try. Heated chamber, gets nice and hot. No issues when it comes to adhesion to the build plate. No glue. It just worked. It's pretty good. But here's what I got here, and this came out looking really, really nice. Now this is, and put this in a way that YouTube can be happy, this is an object that makes it easier to put other objects into another object, because that object, when brand new, has springs that can be very tight, and you might need a little bit of help to keep your thumbs from getting hurt. So that's what this is. And you see it has this little tab right here that presses down to hold what it's going to hold in place so that you can do your thing. And it has held up very, very, very well. Now there's some wear on it. There's definitely some wear on it, but I just used this, today, and it's still holding on. The little tab part is not breaking off. And when you consider the amount of force that I have to use and the fact that this is still there, I mean, this is a pretty strong material. Okay. No layer separations or anything like that. This has been very helpful, very useful, very good. And another thing about this printer that I'll probably just make a separate video about this is that there's another accessory that you can use with it that Bambu Lab is putting out. It's called a filament track switch, and it allows you to connect two different AMS2 units to the printer, but you don't need to specify which filament is going to go through which nozzle. It will switch to whatever nozzle you want it to go into. So that would eliminate any hassle of, let's say if you have black filament that you want to go through the left nozzle, but it's in the AMS that's going to the right nozzle, you don't have to switch those tubes over or switch the filaments over. You can leave them wherever they're going to be and they will go to wherever you want it to go to. Now, the only thing is you have to print some parts that you can mount to the printer to get everything in place. There's going to be some printed pieces that go from the AMS as well. But the kit that they do provide does provide the hardware as far as screws go and the filament track switch itself and the PTFE tubes so that you can connect everything, and is going to leave some PTFE tubes and different wires kind of all over the place in the back. So it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's supposed to make life easier for you if you want to connect more than one AMS to the X2D specifically. So just look out for a future video with that once I got more time to just kind of mess around with it. So at the end of the day, the thing about the X2D is it's not the kind of printer that is going to set the world on fire, so to speak. Okay, this is not the second coming of Bambu Lab. This printer, it is a good printer. It is a step up from what they were doing before with the single nozzle with the X1 series. But if you are already familiar with Bambu Lab printers, you've already been using them, I don't think that you're going to get this printer and you're going to go, this is the most amazing thing ever. This is more of what you are used to with the addition of the second extruder and using the second nozzle to make things just a little bit more convenient for you, especially if time is not of the essence and you want to take advantage of using that auxiliary extruder for support material. The speed is not going to be something that you've never seen before. The quality is not going to be something that you've never seen before, because the speed is still good. The quality is still very good. Like I said, it's what you're used to right now. But the only thing is going to be determining whether you feel like you can make some really good use out of that second nozzle in the same way that you would have to make that decision about the X2D, or whether you would have preferred having something like the P2S that just has the single nozzle because you don't need the dual nozzle setup. You know what I mean? But everything else has just been fine with this printer. But like I said, the biggest problems that I've had with this printer had to do with removing the supports from models using some, but not all, third-party filament without adjusting any of the support parameters in Bambu Studio, which over the past, 2 weeks or so has not been as big of an issue as it was when I first opened up the printer. But, I still experienced it. But it is a good printer and it is definitely a keeper. All right. So if you got your $649 kind of laying around and you want the next step up for the X series, hey, this is what you got. It's more about what you're used to. It's familiar. It works. It's fine, especially if you're just going to be using Bambu Lab filament in it. You can still use the vast majority of the build area, especially if you're only going to be using that one nozzle. So yeah, I think it's fine. It's just not going to set the world on fire, but it doesn't have to. Once again, it's the Bambu Lab X2D. Currently, you can get it for $649, just the printer, or $899 for the AMS2 combo. So thank you all so much for watching. Till next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon.